Hold her up! Stop! Waiting tables. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I'm Alex Curtis, and this is Stop Waiting Tables, the podcast where I interview artists of all kinds, and we have candid conversations about how they are finding a way to create a meaningful life in the arts. So we focus primarily on people who are doing two things. One of them is that they're finding a meaningful way to support themselves alongside their creative career. And that conversation is really just about how do we support ourselves as artists without doing something that's soul-sucking. So how do we find a way that we're showing up to the job that pays our bills every day and feel good about that? You know, that hopefully, we know that the next gig is going to come and we have to hold out until then, or the next project, however that works for you. But how do we basically not hate our lives in the times when we aren't doing the thing that we love? So building a meaningful existence by having a sustainable way of making money, good self-care strategies, things like that. And then the other thing that we're focusing on is talking to people who are finding ways to make their own work, making their own luck, so that the whole model for their career isn't built around, just pounding the pavement until they're discovered, but there's some sense of ownership of themselves and what they're making, so that, your fulfillment as an artist isn't in somebody else's hands. And that's the show, guys. So thank you so much for listening. Today's guest is Vanessa Dunleavy, who's a dear, dear friend of mine and an exceptionally talented performer. As an actress, she's performed on stages of regional theater. She's done summer stock. She did the national tour of Catch Me If You Can. She played Charity in Sweet Charity in Boston. She's performed on cruise ships, a really varied stage career, which we'll talk about and is super exciting. She also is a writer and has written a musical, My Post-Traumatic Cruise Ship Cabaret, and is in the middle of writing a second musical, which is as of yet untitled. She's such a good soul, and we have a wide-ranging conversation about self-care strategies and how she motivates herself creatively. She makes her money as a yoga teacher. We actually work together at a lovely company called Home, H-O-M. If you're in New York, Seattle, or Toronto and are looking for a good place to get involved, I would really recommend it. So you can check that company out. In any case, I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, Vanessa Dunleavy. Thanks for, being on this.
Thanks for having me.
So, you are an actress, a singer, a dancer, and a playwright.
Yeah.
Am I forgetting anything? Does that cover most of the things?
Yoga teacher?
Well, okay, right. I mean, I was thinking I guess, yeah, sure. Yoga. Well, I was thinking just on the creative side, but
sure.
But I'm sure that the yoga community at large would be pretty upset if I discluded.
I think they would.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, what would be all the things that you listed on your creative person resume?
Yeah, I think you just hit them all.
Okay, so I'm not leaving anything out.
I don't think so.
All right. And you're originally from Vermont.
True.
Where in Vermont again?
Middlebury.
Now, there's a Middlebury College.
There is.
And your dad teaches there.
He does.
How long has he been teaching there?
Oh, gosh. I'm not... I would be making it up.
I mean, as long as you've been alive?
No. He, for a long time, was just doing playwriting and teaching at different high schools. He started something called the Young Playwrights Festival.
Is that national? I did a Young Playwrights Festival in San Francisco, started by Lauren Yee, who's a big playwright, was running that festival at the time, but I'm not sure if it was that connected to the one your dad was running, or is that
I very much doubt it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was mostly a Vermont thing that he was doing, but he would go around to high schools and
in Middlebury.
In Vermont, and help kids write like 10-minute one acts, and then at UVM, University of Vermont, I think like once a year there would be a weekend where professional actors from New York would come in and read the work that the students had written. So yeah, that was sort of his jam for a while, and then he was also teaching at University of Vermont for a bit, and then he moved to Middlebury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't born in Middlebury.
When I say moved to Middlebury, I mean he stopped commuting from Middlebury to Burlington and stayed in Middlebury and taught at the college there.
Okay, got it. So so your dad's an artist, he's a playwright. Mm-hmm. Does he have other hats that he wears?
He has started something called Oratory Now. He's really interested in rhetoric, and he started teaching this, I guess you could call it a club, at the college now, and it's students learning how to speak and write speeches, and that's really taken off and been really exciting for him. It's sort of a change for him from just writing plays, but he's enjoying it a lot, and I think he's getting a lot of good feedback from it. It's kind of like a forgotten art.
And this is, how is this different from like a debate club or something like that?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's similar. I don't know.
All right. Now, is your mom also an artist?
By no means. She is a language teacher.
Okay.
She taught for 31 years in my high school, French, Spanish, and Latin. And then she retired a couple years ago and promptly got a new job as an elementary school French teacher.
Okay.
And then she finally retired about 2 years ago and is still tutoring. She doesn't stop. Can't stop, won't stop.
And when and how did your parents, what's the love story of your parents?
Oh, well, when I was little, I was told that they met in Scotland at St. Andrews at a party, and
What's
it was
St. Andrews?
It's a college.
Okay.
Where Prince William went. And I was told that they met at a party, and it was a snowy evening, and they went sledding, and the rest is history. Later, I found out that my mom was delivering marijuana to this party, and which is funny because my mom is the most straight edge person you've ever met. I don't think she's ever smoked in her life, but somebody had left marijuana at her apartment, her flat in London, and they wanted it back, and they asked her to please put it in the mail, and she wouldn't because she had signed something about, I don't know, like pledged allegiance to the Queen, that she would never use the postal service for something like that. And so she wouldn't put it in an envelope, but she would put it in the bottom of a sleeping bag and transport it on a train herself to get it back to its rightful owner. And in the process of that, she met my dad.
Oh. Okay, so your dad is a writer, artist. Your mom is a language teacher. Mm-hmm. You're in Middlebury. What's Middlebury like? Is it a college town? Is it like a hippie enclave? What's the sort of mix like?
It is a mix of college and farming, kind of. So my high school was a lot of people whose parents worked at the college, and then a lot of people who, had lived there for generations, sort of working the land. So it was an interesting mix of people. Small town, super small. Everybody knew everyone's business, which had its ups and downs.
Yeah,
You know?
what is a high moment and a low moment? I don't know.
Well, I guess you knew everyone. Like, you could always ask, I don't know, so-and-so's mom if you needed a favor, and she knew who you were and all of that stuff. But then people got pigeonholed too. Like, if you messed up when you were 12, it was going to follow you for the rest of your life in that town.
So what was your role? How were you pigeonholed?
I think I was mostly pigeonholed as Frankie Dunleavy's daughter, because my mother was a very strict teacher in the high school, and she was known for her big personality, and people either loved her or hated her. And so my reputation sort of preceded me as her daughter.
Oh.
Good or bad, whatever that meant. But she was very well known in our town.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your dad was more under the radar? It's just because everyone goes to the high school,
Yeah,
but he's at the college and it's
school.
a different community.
Yeah. People knew my dad too, but he wasn't as much of a controversial figure, I would say.
Okay.
It was like good old Dana Yet and he's no one had an issue.
And then what's the moment in your life when you discover performing? Is performing the first artistic thing that you got into, or were there other paths that you tried first?
No, performing was the first thing. My dad had written something. I think it was a short, maybe a 10-minute one act, and he cast my brother and I in it.
And you were what ages at the time?
Gosh, I want to say I was like 7.
Okay.
And I had been dancing, and I was a big extrovert always. But I think my first time on stage was that show. And we did it. My father used to teach at something called Governor's Institute on the Arts. And it was a 2-week program for high schoolers. And they had, they had dance and singing and theater and puppet making and sculpture and kind of, you name it, graphic design. It was a really, really big part of growing up for me, because Dad would teach there and my brother and I would go as faculty brats, we were called, and just sort of, get to experience it all. And so we performed in front of that camp. And I still remember I said, instead of Canada, there was some line about Canada and I accidentally said Canada. And I just remember feeling crestfallen and like, well, this was the beginning and the end of my career.
It's like Sally in it's one of the Peanuts cartoons. I think it's the one about the Great Pumpkin. Uh-huh. Anyway, I think they're doing a play about the Pilgrims, and she has it must be Christmas, because her line is "Hark." Uh-huh. And she's like, the bit is she's practicing this for days, hark, hark, hark. And she gets on stage and yells, hockey stick!
Oh, I remember that!
Yep. So that was your hockey stick moment.
That was my hockey stick moment.
And then was that also the moment you were like, but I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life?
I don't remember feeling like this was it, but I loved being on stage.
Yeah.
I loved that feeling of, the setup of it, that like I am in the light and the audience is in the dark, and that somehow gives me some power. And I felt like I felt like I had total permission to be myself on stage.
Yeah.
And say, things like Canada if I wanted to.
You did have the power to do that. No one could or did stop you.
Yeah.
And the show went on.
The show went on.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you grow up in Middlebury, you finish high school. Mm-hmm. When you finish high school, is your intention to go be a professional performer, or did you, because I know you went to Occidental?
Yes.
In LA.
Yeah.
And Was that to major in performance, or was that did you have other dreams at the time?
No, I wanted to. That was all I had. That was my only plan.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I wanted to be an actor, and my parents, both coming from academia, were supportive of my dreams for theater, but they very much believed that a liberal arts education was going to be was going to help in my life. And I had visited Occidental, and I had met some of the teachers there in their theater department, and I thought, this could be a nice compromise for us, that I'll go get my liberal arts degree, but I'll major in this and I'll be with these people.
Do you have and I don't know how it works at a liberal arts school. Do you just get a degree in liberal arts, or do you still have a major?
You still have a major.
Okay, so what was your major going to be?
It was going to be theater.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But then I dropped out. So I have a semester of college under my belt.
Oh, so you didn't waste too much time before dropping out.
By no means. I came home for Christmas, and I was like, psh, that's it. That's a wrap.
Great, wow. And what was the reason, or what was the moment when you were like, this was going to be a nice compromise, but actually, fuck that noise.
I could not. It was not going to work for me. And I knew that when I was a junior in high school. I remember doing the, college shopping, the touring of campuses with my father. And I had a physical reaction to being on college campuses. My stomach would turn inside out. I never wanted to live in a dorm or go to a cafeteria, or like the whole college experience to me that everyone had raved about sounded like my own personal hell. And I thought everybody felt like that, and just nobody was talking about it. It was just, we're all playing this game that, we're going to go off and have this great experience, but we really just need to get through it. And it turned out that was not the case. I got there, and I just never felt like it was where I was supposed to be. I remember I was doing a show, again, that my father wrote. Nepotism served me very well for a number of years. And it was between my senior year of high school and my freshman year at college. And the show conflicted with the first couple days of orientation at Occidental. But, I was like, well, that's fine. I can catch up. Orientation, what does that matter? So I finished the show, and I showed up a few days late for college, and I remember thinking, I really screwed the pooch on this one. Everyone's already best friends in these 3 days, and I've ruined it.
Right.
Yeah. And then that just continued. I met some really great people there, and I loved the classes I was taking in the theater department. But I just, like, in my bones, I was like, this is not for me. So then I came home and just sort of put my foot down. Said I wasn't getting back on the plane. And I didn't.
How'd they take that?
I think that they were, I think it was challenging for them. But ultimately, they trusted me. And they, I had always wanted to come straight to New York. That was my dream. And that scared them a lot. And so sort of in between dropping out and moving here, I decided I would go to cosmetology school. And that would be a way to ensure that I wouldn't die on the streets of New York. I would have a skill, and it could support me as I auditioned and worked in theater. And I think that appeased them for a little bit.
Okay.
Oh yeah, she's got a plan. She's figuring this out.
So when you told them you were not going back, you said, but I'm going to learn to cut hair. So there's, like, don't worry.
Yeah, I don't think I had it that far together yet. I
Okay.
was just like, heads up, I'm not going back to school, and I'm going to live with you for a little bit until I figure it out. And then I don't even know how the hair thing came up. I really don't. I just thought, not ready to be eaten up in New York without something that, would help me pay my bills. And I'm certainly not going back to school. So what I ended up moving to Burlington, which is about 45 minutes away from my parents, and doing cosmetology school there.
Is that just because that's where there was a cosmetology school?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it like, I'm moving to the slightly bigger city?
Oh, there was a lot of that too. It was God forbid I should be 18 years old and living in my childhood bedroom. So I'll move a short drive away.
I mean, I understand that.
Yeah.
My parents dropped me off for college, and I've really, haven't been able to, go back for any substantial stretch of time. I went back for the first Christmas vacation, which I think was 3-4 weeks.
Yeah.
Much too long. But after having independence and being my own person and not needing to ask for permission for anything, I really can't go back to that.
Yeah. It felt, you're right, it was like the point of no return. I'm an adult now, and you can't tell me when I need to be home and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I really wanted, it was like training wheels for me going to Burlington, because I wanted to be out on my own, but I still needed my mom to iron my clothes.
Okay.
I
mean, but the training wheels idea makes sense. I feel like that is basically what college is.
Right.
I mean, you're taking classes. It's high school with a little bit more flexibility, but still a lot of structure because you have your classes, and that's so consuming.
Yeah.
And there's such a community on campus. But you don't have, parents doing your laundry. You don't have a curfew that you're accountable to anyone for. So it is like I almost think that as much or more than the education ends up, being a part of your adult life, having that stepping stone into becoming, putting on your real grown-up pants is such a big deal. Sure.
So that was a rude awakening for me when I moved to New York, and it was all me. Mom and dad weren't going to come to my rescue or fold my laundry or any of that.
And how old were you when this happened? When you moved to New York?
19.
Okay, and just to cover this part of the story, so how long did you do cosmetology school before leaving that?
2 weeks, maybe?
Were you able to get your deposit back at that point?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I mean, on the outside, you don't seem like it takes very long for you to figure out. You know yourself well enough that you can try it and then not waste. You're not wasting a lot of time on life choices that don't suit you.
No, for sure. It also helped that I burned somebody quite badly as I was washing his hair, and that was a swift kick in the "this is not for you" direction.
Is he okay now?
I couldn't tell you. To be fair, it wasn't my fault. It was one of those New York City. It was at a men's salon in Tribeca.
Oh, so you did hair here
For a minute, for 2 weeks.
So did you actually got through and got your cosmetology license in Burlington?
I did 1,000 hours of school in Burlington because Vermont needs 1,500 for you to take your test and get your license, but New York needs 1,000. I couldn't tell you why. I thought that was feels backwards to me. Wow, what do we got mullets in Vermont? What do we need 500 more hours for? But so in cosmetology, I was like, you guys have to be here for 1,500. I'm peacing out. I'm going to the big city. And then I did not even take the test.
So you didn't do a state board?
Nope.
So at that point, it didn't even matter how many hours you were there for, because like you didn't get certified. No one checked. No one cared. Okay.
No.
So you do 1,000 hours. Mm-hmm. Presumably, there's 500 more hours of curriculum that you just like pieced out for.
Oh yeah.
Okay, move to New York at what age?
19.
Okay, move at 19. And you get a job in Tribeca?
Mm-hmm. And it was a men's salon. I don't know. I mean, in those last 500 hours that I skipped, they must have gone over how to use a sink properly to wash someone's hair, because it got very hot very quickly, and that was my last day.
But you said it wasn't your fault.
It wasn't my fault. You know, finicky like water in New York. You turn it a little bit hot, and all of a sudden it's scalding, or you know, you put in a little bit of cold, and now it's icy. It was like that, Alex.
Okay, all right, right.
And what's a girl to do? Really?
I think there's supposed to be a middle step where you test it on your fingers first and then put a human head in there. But, I mean, that's when it happened.
Details.
And then, so you're in Vermont, 1,000 hours of cosmetology, moved to New York, which is so freaking brave, by the way.
Oh.
I mean, for me, you know, there was college. Had a theater company in the Bay Area for a couple of years, then went to grad school. And like, I knew I needed the training of graduate school, or I felt like that was something that was important for me creatively. But I also never deluded myself into feeling that part of that was I was afraid to move to New York.
Sure.
And wanted to have the exposure of a showcase to like give me like a push, so that I'm not just, you know, showing up and no one knows me.
Yeah.
And to have that social network of like, well, I have classmates that I know who are doing the same move. So again, I'm not going to feel like one lost person among the 8 million people.
Right.
Did you
have
a
lot of sense?
Yeah, but you just had the courage to be like, I'm going to go fight it out and like make it happen on my own, which is I think I'm so. That seems like such an overwhelming idea to me. That like you are so brave.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it was bravery as much as the other way didn't seem like an option for me. Occidental wasn't. I mean, that just it just wasn't for me. It wasn't going to work. It made my skin crawl, and I still don't know why, because I'm a very sociable person. I like working in groups. Occidental was small, and I felt like there could have been a community there for me. But for whatever reason, it did not feel like an option for me. And I had grown up with a voice teacher who worked at a conservatory here in New York. And so from a very young age, I wanted to go to that school.
Circle in the Square.
Circle in the Square, yep. And so I just sort of had that as the goal. And I really didn't take into consideration how rough the streets of New York can be, and how I was only 19. And I felt like I was a little naive. Well, of course I was naive.
Well, right. I mean, that's what 19 is.
Right. But it didn't feel like I was doing a big brave thing. It felt like, oh yeah, the school is there, and therefore I will go. And
right. So you had some kind of a bridge, because you knew your voice teacher gave you a school, so you had that as a direction. Mm-hmm. Your voice teacher also connected you to the apartment that you're still in, right? Oh. Was that connection?
Nope.
No?
No.
So all you had coming here was there's a program I'm going to do.
Yes. I hadn't auditioned or gotten into it.
Okay.
And I ended up taking a year between moving here and actually going to Circle. Mm-hmm. I had met a friend when I was 15 at a musical theater camp in Colorado, and she moved to New York when she was 18. And that was my plan before Occidental. Okay, if I have to get a liberal arts degree, I'm gonna take a year in between, and I'm gonna go live with my friend Abby in New York. Mm-hmm. And I got scared out of that.
You got scared, or did other people scare you?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay. So someone else scared you
out
of your idea.
A lot of people did. I think my dad and my mom, my father knew a lot of actors, and we had close family friends who that was what they had done their whole lives. And I just remember a lot of people, not sure if they actually said New York will eat you alive, but that was the message that I got from these people who I had admired and looked up to, and to them, it was too soon. It was not a smart idea. It was not the way to go. And I heard that, and when I got into Occidental. And I got a pretty big scholarship at Occidental. I don't know that they had ever had a Vermonter there, so I was maybe just like filling some quota for them.
Some kind of like affirmative action for the underrepresented states.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Great. Yep.
And so that felt like, wow, well, why would I do this big scary thing when everyone, this is the route that I'm supposed to. You can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes, supposed to take, and there's a little cushy, scholarship and all of that. But originally I wanted to move here with Abby, and she was, she had been homeschooled in Kansas City and was used to just packing her bags and showing up in a new place. And I sort of broke our collective hearts when I had to tell her, no, I'm going to go to college, but I'll meet you there. And I thought I would meet her there in 4 years, and it turned out I would meet her there in a year. So I did have that. I had a friend here who had an apartment in Times Square, and we lived in this little studio together in Times Square, which was culture shock to me.
Yeah. I mean, you moved to not only just an incredibly busy city, but then moved to the busiest part of the city.
Yeah. And I remember Abby saying to me one day, like, you're gonna have to lock the apartment door. Like, that's not an option till you're in Times Square. Like, you're cute, welcome, love your spirit, you need to lock the door. And it was, I just had a steep learning curve.
That's so funny. Because I'm so in Vermont, you don't lock your doors.
Nah.
My parents live in a lovely little beachy town in Southern California, and my mom is very worried if at any point she comes home and the doors are unlocked, or even if my dad is in the house, if the door is unlocked, she's concerned. Very concerned about people like looking in through the windows. I'm not sure. There were some robberies of, some people's cars got broken into, but I'm sure that must happen sometimes in Vermont. Is that really an idyllic place where nobody ever takes thieves, crime? There's no crime at all.
No, I'm sure that's not true. I don't know. It just wasn't a thing that we did growing up. I think my parents do now.
Okay.
Yeah, gosh, no. Why would you lock the door? Then you have to use a key to get back in.
Inconvenient.
What if you're in a rush?
So once you move to New York, you have a year before Circle in the Square happens. What are you doing in that first year? How were you sort of finding your sea legs in the city? What was the adjustment process like for you?
It was hard. It was another one of my brilliant plans moving here was that during cosmetology school, I was paying my way through by waiting tables at, thank God, It's Friday, also known as TGIF. Mm-hmm. And now TGIF is both in Vermont and in New York City. And so...
Is it even in Times Square?
Even is in Times Square. And so I was like, well, I'll just transfer to, 47th and 7th or whatever it was. And so I didn't have, that's not a thing. TGIF doesn't have like a transferring perk.
Because I think Starbucks has a transferring policy.
Yeah.
Trader Joe's, I think, has a transferring policy. TGIF, no.
Not that I remember. Nobody was like, "Yep, you have a job there." But I was pretty sure that I could weasel my way in, and weasel I did. And my first day, I was robbed by a coworker. Just welcome to New York. The woman who was training me told me to put my bag in this, employee area. And so I did my shift with her, and she was showing me the ropes. And then I left work that day, and I went to charge something on my card, and it was gone, and all my cash was gone. So,
Ow.
So that was a nice welcome.
Uh-huh.
And I lasted maybe like 2 weeks at that Fridays, because I kept walking by this place on my way home called Ellen's Stardust Diner. And I could hear music coming from there, and people were belting out like 50s songs and musical theater, and that's where I wanted to be. So I auditioned there, and I got a job pretty quickly and started waiting tables there and, singing for my supper.
So their gimmick is all of the servers also sing.
Yep.
Like every time you bring an entree, or it's
just continuous singing, sometimes screaming into the mic. So, however many servers are working that day, we just sort of went through a set list. And so you weren't singing all the time. Singing maybe once every 12 people, or you might jump in on a duet with somebody. But yeah, that place is such mixed feelings for me. It was my first home here, really. And I met people who are lifelong friends, and I really honed my skills there as a singer. I had been in rock bands and doing little, shows here and there in Vermont as a singer, but I had never heard myself so clearly as I did at Ellen's. I had a mic, and I had a sound system, and I had an audience, and I was working my tail off there to pay my bills. And I was able to really, work on my craft. And so, as crazy and dysfunctional as that place turned out to be, that was really where I landed here. And I continued to work there for the next 8 years or so, in between gigs. And they understood that we were all actors, and so we would get a job and leave for a couple months and come right back, and our schedule was there for us. And it was a really unique opportunity. And so I started working there, and then the following year I went to school and, just waited tables on the weekends.
And then you're at, how long is the Circle in the Square program?
2 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a certificate? Is it like an associate's degree?
No.
It's not like...
I joke that it's essentially like a participation ribbon.
Okay.
Just like, you came here. Good job.
Yeah. And what's the training there like?
So they have 2 different programs. They have a musical theater program and a straight acting program. And they're very similar. It's essentially the straight acting program plus singing classes if you are doing musical theater. And they did, even if you were in the straight acting program, they had, voice for actors. So the non-singers were singing as well. But and in the straight theater program there was dancing as well. So it was everything that I wanted it to be. It was all day, every day. the kind of concentrated work that I wasn't going to find at a liberal arts school.
Do you think if you'd gone to a BFA program that your college experience might have gone differently?
Maybe. Yeah.
So you go to Circle in the Square where you get that conservatory experience.
Right.
As in the musical theater program.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens outside of it? Do they have a showcase? What was one of the most valuable thing? What was the most valuable lesson that you took from being there? Like, what do you feel like you really learned, or how did you change?
I learned about work ethic there. It was one of those programs, and I think this is true for really anything, but to me it was the first time, because in high school I was such a good student. I could cram for any test, and I would work hard for the grade, but I wasn't actually curious about the knowledge or what I was learning. And so I had a different kind of way to work in high school, and now I was in this conservatory where I knew I could do as little or as much as I wanted, and there was no grade. Nobody was going to pat me on the back and say, "You get an A, Vanessa." So it really came down to, how much do I want this? And it turned out I wanted it a whole hell of a lot. Those were two of the hardest working years I've ever had. Also, funnily enough, two of the darkest years. There was a lot of emotional mining going on that happened during that. And I think I had this one teacher, Alan Langdon, who's also from Vermont. And he sort of flipped acting on its head for me. He was not going to allow me to do the tricks that I had picked up along the way. All my sort of all my bullshitting that a lot of people would buy was not gonna fly with him, because he was only interested in the truth, and that was really frustrating for me, because it was like, well, this has worked for me. People respond to this. I throw a little wink, I do a little shimmy, and I was being more of a showman when I was growing up.
It's something they said to me, that our voice teacher in grad school, Tom Jones, he said to Tom Jones, right?
That's new pussy.
He said that to me in my first year. At one point he said, "Oh, you're a performer, and we need to make you an actor."
Yeah.
So
that's hard. It's so invalidating.
Yeah. I think something that I'm working on figuring out for myself now is, but being a performer is still a skill.
Sure.
And there are a lot of actors who aren't good performers.
Sure.
Outside of like the particular frame of the play or the film or the whatever. And so there's a place for that, but that process of letting go of your tricks, of trying to figure out like, well, what is, because to some degree it's a way out being a performer, that's like, there's so much more underneath that you don't have to tap.
Right.
So I can imagine that having a teacher who's really pushing you could bring up the shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And he would always have us, there was always an opportunity before we did a scene to tell a personal story. And sometimes I would, share something, and sometimes I wouldn't. But he gave me the tool of personalizing and mining my own experience for what would bring me into the character. So whether that was bringing in photos of something, or putting in my headphones and taking a moment to listen to a song, or whatever it was, that was my way of launching into characters, and I found that to be sort of revolutionary. Instead of putting on a character, it was like finding them from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I also watched a lot of my peers. I felt doing what I was doing in high school, which was just doing the work to get by. And I saw how that wasn't serving them. And so it just made me double down even more. And there were pros and cons to that. Like, I couldn't get out of the conservatory when I left the theater that day. Like, those 2 years I was completely consumed by it.
There's no leaving it at the the door.
No.
It always came home with you.
Yeah. And that was, I think, something that I was afraid of in the college experience or thinking about a BFA was, I want to go home to a real person, apartment or house and have my alone time and not be surrounded by these people that I'm working with all day. And that bubble was what nauseated me. And eating in a cafeteria with people and all that. It was like, I really wanted to leave that at the door and go and pretend to be an adult.
Yeah, I get that. I think my happiest year of graduate school, I was living with a friend. He worked at the theater, and he was dating someone who had gone through the same MFA program. So he was familiar with all the players. So he was someone I could talk to at the end of the night, but also he had real person problems.
Right.
And he didn't care who got what part in what show.
Right.
And so to be able to go home and have someone to talk to and feel human and not like you're only this one thing.
Yeah.
I found so much more filling.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Did this teacher describe himself as teaching a particular style of acting?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure that he ever had a name for it. He also, our second year of his class, we basically spent on Chekhov's Seagull. And I was dreading it. I thought there could not be anything more boring. But damn, if he didn't, that play, studying that play gave us all so much. And we would switch characters, throughout the year, Masha or Nina or whoever we were playing, and there was just so much to take from it. Whereas upon my first read, I was like, ugh, we're gonna talk about the weather, Chekhov? Come on.
Right.
But he had a brilliant way of introducing that work to us in our second year, when we had already had the first year to choose our own material. And yeah, I feel like I approach plays differently now because of my experience with the Seagull and him.
And then what happened after Circle in the Square? Did you get a showcase? Or was it just, it was over and now go do the thing?
We had a showcase. Circle was so much about the work and not so much at all about preparing you to be a professional actor in New York City.
Same thing.
Yeah. Which I very much appreciate now, all these years later. But I remember feeling like completely baffled and on my own. We did not go over how to audition. We didn't get together, a songbook or there were no like, what's your 16 bar cut? That just wasn't part of it. And so I felt really like, oh shit, this is the real world. What am I doing here? And we did have a showcase, and I I remember there was one, gosh, I don't even remember her name, but I had a meeting with someone who basically said, you have so much potential. You are far too fat for this industry. And that was just absolutely soul crushing to me. She basically was like, lose 15 pounds, come back, and we'll see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Although I haven't had that experience, but I've heard about that.
Yeah.
I've even heard about that with people who are already like on the face of it, like in incredible shape, but it's like, sorry, you need to get down to like, I don't know what a good BMI is, like 5% body fat, and then come in. Which
was, that was soul crushing to me, and I just.
How did you bounce back from that?
I never have. I left. I went. I did a cruise ship. I left the city for a year.
And was the cruise ship something? Was that an opportunity you got out of the showcase, or was that then you started auditioning and it was just a gig you booked?
I started auditioning.
Were you equity?
No,
are you equity?
I am equity, but I was not at the time.
Okay. So was that an EPA, or how did you get the cruise ship?
Oh my, I don't even remember. I think it was just an open call. It was Norwegian Cruise Lines was the first ship that I booked, and I actually had a call back for them that they had taped, and then I never heard anything. And then I think it was months later that I got an email, and they said, we were going back over some old tapes and loved what we saw, and we'd like to offer you this contract. So it was not something that I thought I had already forgotten about it. I think it was like at a Ripley Greer studio or something like that, a little open call.
Mm-hmm. So you get a cruise ship.
Mm-hmm.
What's the setup like when you do a cruise ship? I have friends of friends who've done it, as someone who's not a singer or dancer, that's not on the docket of things that I'm ever going to go up for.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, are there people who are career cruise ship performers?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? Like, if you were going to be a career cruise ship performer, what does your life look like?
Well, I think there's a couple different lanes for it. People, what I was doing was I was a vocalist in the production, and there were there's other opportunities to be either a guest entertainer. So maybe you have your own show and you pop in to different ships for a week or maybe two, and you're doing your show. But for me, we were the in-house production team, and we did the same shows for 6 months. Then there were also singers or singer-songwriters that were sort of the lounge acts. So maybe you were playing in one of the restaurants or one of the bars. Those were tough gigs. They played a lot. We had a pretty dreamy setup. We had maybe 2 or 3 nights that we worked in the week, and we would do back-to-back shows. And then
like a 7 and a 9 back-to-back?
Yeah. And then we were passengers the rest of the time. It was a really dreamy gig. But it was also not artistically fulfilling.
Right.
We were doing, and it's changed now, cruise ships, this was 2008, 2009. Now cruise ships are doing full productions. You can go on a Carnival cruise line and see Hairspray or Rock of Ages.
But what you were doing is more like a review.
It was a review.
Okay.
And Tom Jones and Cher and, and only like really snippets of each song. There was no scene work. There was no, nobody. And that was, I was back to all my old tricks. I was back to all my, performing, because there was no room for truth on that stage. Nobody was interested. We were really catering to, well, for the first ship, an older crowd. For the second ship that I did, it was a lot hipper. But yeah, there was no room for my acting training there. So I had a blast, and I worked hard. But it was not, it wasn't going to fulfill me artistically.
Right. I guess can you tell me more about what, like, the people on the boat who do this for life? What is their setup like? I guess I'm just curious for myself, and also, for anyone out there who may be interested, who might be listening to this and be like, no, but that's, like, that wasn't your thing, but like, it might be their thing.
Yeah.
What is a cruise ship career look like?
Well,
as much as you know about it.
Yeah, I do know. I mean, it is a sexy little gig. So I know a lot of people who have been doing it for a decade or longer. You continue once. I would say that people usually get in with a company.
Like a cruise line company.
With a cruise line company, yeah. And then they are just, once you start to know, it's sort of, there are certain tracks in each of these shows that if you know this track, then you are an asset to the company, because say someone, hurts themselves on another contract, you can instantly go in and replace it, because it's the same thing on every ship. So yeah, people just go from contract to contract, and mostly they're 6-month contracts, or they were when I was doing it. But also there is such a thing as like a vacation swing, or someone that just comes in to cover for a little bit. I think the really exciting, the exciting way that I would love to work on a cruise ship, or I would have loved to work on a cruise ship, is to be bringing your own show, to be a guest entertainer. And that means that you can be on a ship for a week, and then you're off for a week, and then you go join another ship somewhere else, and then you're off. But it can be very isolating to be on the same ship for 6 months.
Right. So you really have to have the disposition for that. But when you're on the ship, you have no expenses, right? They're putting you up, they're feeding you.
Yep.
Your booze is covered too, right?
Your booze is massively discounted. I think it was like $1 for whatever you wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So free food, almost free booze, free housing.
Yep.
So assuming you've sublet or don't have a place back home, you're just banking.
Yep.
And what is a 6-month contract? Or, I mean, in 2008, what was a 6-month contract paying about?
I was making like $1,400 a week.
Okay. I mean, that's serious money. And then if you're not spending, if that's almost all funny money, so you can leave a 6-month contract.
And pay off your theater conservatory training.
Oh, so that's how you paid off school.
Yeah.
And then by the time you left, so you'd paid off school, did you have a cushion when you were done? Like, how much did you have in savings at that point?
I think I had a little bit of a cushion, yeah.
Okay.
I came home to a very sick kitty, and I spent a lot of that cushion trying to save the sick kitty.
So this requires a little bit more background explanation. So you had a cat.
I had a cat.
Left it in someone's care while you were on a ship. Was this any fault of that person, or just the cat got sick?
That asshole. No, the cat just got sick. May he rest in peace. His name was Bunches, and he was 4.
Oh,
and
a young sick cat.
A young buck. But he, I actually, when I finished that second contract, I went to Europe for the summer. And my best friend Adam had decided to move to New York City, and so it worked out really well. I went to Europe, and he stayed in my apartment and took care of my cat. And when I got back, he was like, yeah, Bunches just wants to pee all over this apartment. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and it turned out he had kidney stones and a bladder infection. So I spent more than I'd like to admit on surgeries for Bunchy. And it just, and then towards the end of it, it turned out that he also had heart disease on top of it. But nobody told, they'll do surgery on a goldfish. They will, nobody is going to tell you, baby doll, this cat is not going to make it.
Right.
Stop throwing your money at it. So I just kept, it wouldn't have occurred to me to not spend the money on him. I just loved him so much.
Right.
But then bless her heart, I had this one vet that called and was like, we can keep this up, but it's not kind, and he's probably not a viable.
Right.
So we put Dear Bunchy down.
Yeah.
And it costs money to cremate a cat. Did you know that? So after all of these surgeries, then it was going to be like $500 to dispose of Bunchy's body.
Well, I think because you for free just leave the animal there and then it'll get cremated in a mass cremation.
That's not even free. It was less money to have dogs and cats put all together, but it wasn't free.
So the best thing is just to take the dead animal and bury it in your backyard.
Turns out the best thing is to have them freeze it, put it in a bag, and carry it on an Amtrak train with you back to Vermont, where your dad will dig a hole by the pond.
Got it.
And that's what we did.
Did it cost him to freeze your cat?
Yep, I took a frozen cat on an Amtrak.
But did you have to pay for that?
No.
The cat freezing?
No.
Okay.
Cat freezing is free.
Okay, so you can always freeze your animal, go bury it in someone else's yard if you don't have one, or maybe sneak the animal into a trash bag. Maybe. I don't know. That sounds... that's probably a rule. Against that.
I think it's frowned upon.
Well, so Bunches has a beautiful spot.
He does.
By a pond.
He does. Yeah.
So then... I know about the cruise time, and then I don't know about... So what happened after that? So you come back, you're working at the diner with the singing, and you're back to auditioning.
Yeah. And I just started booking little regional gigs. I think the first gig I did was a summer. We did Boeing.
That's a fun show.
Oh, it was so fun. We did Boeing and some Agatha Christie show.
Okay.
And it was super fun. It was hard. I don't think I realized what summer stock entailed. So I did that, and then I just kept bebopping around. And I loved it. It was stressful for me to try to keep my apartment and keep some semblance of a social life and be leaving as much as I was leaving.
Yeah. I feel like that's a hazard that doesn't get talked about a lot. That if you're a working actor on the regional theater circuit, your apartment, your life in New York is very in and out.
Yeah.
And your whole social network, all of that. And I got really screwed. I've sadly only done one show since coming to New York and leaving grad school. It was
your own?
No, well, sure. Only one job, one play. Okay. I've done TV work, but only one play that was a regional theater. And it was in Ohio, and it was my, I think, second year in New York. Mm-hmm. And I had, that whole first year was just figuring out how to live. So I had myself set up, with my 2 yoga studios, that between the two of them, I had, I think, 12 or 15 classes a week, which was enough to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And it would, my life was working. Mm-hmm. And then I left town, did that gig, came back, they'd given away all my shifts.
Sure.
it never came back. Like I never figured it out again.
Yeah.
And that's that trade-off of the, it takes so much to build a foundation so you can live in New York, but then the point of what you're here for is to go do the art that involves leaving.
Right.
But then the foundation that let you leave goes away, and that's really challenging. In that respect, you were so lucky that the diner was flexible.
Exactly. That was the reason to be there. The people were not the managers or the owners, my coworkers,
the people who were in the boat with you.
Yep. Yeah, they were wonderful, and we had a freaking blast there. But that was the reason to work there, because it would welcome you back.
Right.
But even then, subletting or just leaving the life that you had built here, I found that to be challenging.
And I know that at a certain point, you eventually stop auditioning for theater. Mm-hmm. But during the time that you are, what are some of the moments that you were proudest of?
For me, dancing, of acting, singing, and dancing, I always felt like a fake as a dancer. And
really? Isn't it the thing you started doing first? I mean, like as a little kid, you started dancing?
I was singing and acting before I was dancing. In my town, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for dance. There was one woman who taught ballet, but I found her scary. And then there was another woman that I studied with for years. We couldn't afford much. And my parents weren't wild about her style of teaching. It was it was flashy, and maybe I don't know if that they felt like it was over sexualizing. And I remember being like, I think I was in 3rd grade, and they had pulled me out of some dance class I was in because it was too much T and A. And you say that to a 3rd grader, and I was like, what is T and or A? I don't know what this means. Why can't I just dance? We were doing James Brown. It was fun. But I didn't get the training that when I moved to New York, I realized everybody else had. Mm-hmm. And so I always felt very intimidated by dancers and hugely intimidated by dance calls. I could walk in to a singing call, no problem. I had a lot of confidence with the way that I sounded and the way that I could interpret a song, and I felt like I would always get the call back from my voice, and then it was like, oh, they're gonna see me dance, and that's the end of my road. So the few times that I was able to get in the headspace of, even if I'm not, for me, I was physically able to do a lot of the moves, but learning choreography in a very short amount of time, my brain would just get so frazzled. If you could have given me the combination and sent me on my way for 24 hours, I could come back and nail it. But teaching on the fly in a room with other people who I was sure they were, better than me, not even just on the dance floor, but probably in life. That was a real setup for spinning brain and for just losing my confidence. So the few times that I was able to kind of forget about the moves and forget about executing it perfectly and perform, that was when I would book things, because when I could rest in the knowledge that I was innately interesting, when I was just being me, was, then it didn't really matter if I landed that pirouette, because who cares? You can work on that later. when I auditioned for Catch Me If You Can, which was the which was the only tour I ever did, there was a mistake with the casting studio, and I didn't get a call back, but I was supposed to. And I had worked with the director before, and I Facebook messaged him, and he said, "I'll see you Monday." And I said, "No, I didn't get called back." And he said, "Yes, you absolutely did. You didn't get that message." And so I showed up because I was supposed to be there, but something had fallen through. And I still remember, like, all throughout that, we toured for 10 months or 11 months or something. And I always remember thinking, like, I'm so glad that I sort of advocated for myself and reached out just to be like, I nailed that. Mm-hmm. Are you sure? And I don't know that that's ever happened before. So that was cool. I felt like, yeah, if I had just, taken it for what it was and gone back to the diner that night, I wouldn't have been on that tour.
Right. Was there anything that happened or that you thought, or because it's so difficult to internalize, really believe like that you are inherently interesting and that you are enough. But I feel like that's the ground, like that's the ground you have to stand on to be able to move forward and do anything else.
Yeah.
Were those just flashes? Where it just sort of stuck, or did you have a process of, like an affirmation that you would say, or just what was the way that you'd sort of, in the moments where it did come together for you, what helped you feel yourself and in your power?
It's a great question. I think it was sort of tapping back into the love that I felt for it when I was a kid, when I wasn't being judged, when it didn't matter, when it wasn't what was going to help me pay my rent, when it was just a complete and utter joy. If I was able to tap into that, then I could sort of lose all of the ego and the chatter that would come into my mind, and I could usually trust that I had done that I had picked this path for a reason. And I had a director, Guy Stroman, who he's a very dear friend of mine, and he's taught me so much about letting the audience come to you and trusting that the audience is smart, and that if you give them too much, it's almost like demeaning to them, or like spoon feeding in a way. And Guy always taught me that I want them on the edge of their seats, and the only way to do that was to be, feet on the ground in my body, and not overly emoting or showing anything, just being, the difference between showing and being. And if I could do that successfully, and I could see that, I could always see that my father was great in that he took me to see a lot of theater, and I inherently knew the difference from watching actors when they were trying to show me something and when they were just, being. And so I think tapping into that was where I could actually book the role.
Yeah. Wow. And then, so you had you've had a pretty solid amount of success at this point. The cruise ship tour, a national tour, a number of regional gigs. Mm-hmm. What's the point when you decide not to keep auditioning for theater? And if that's not a solid decision, that's just something that I know that we've talked about recently. Yeah,
no, it was a very solid decision. It was a moment I had just gotten back from doing my dream role, which was Sweet Charity. And it was when Sutton Foster's production was coming to New York, and they were auditioning here. And I had just gotten back from it, and I thought, well, hell yeah, I'm going to audition for this. And I went in, and there was maybe 4 or 5 people behind the table, and I was proud of my audition. In my best moments auditioning, I would look at it as an opportunity to do what I love. So even if it was only 16 bars of what I love, cool. I'm going to come in, I'm going to do this, I'm going to close the door and go live the rest of my life and, kind of forget about it. And I felt like I had walked into that audition in a good mindset. I had just come off of a big high doing this production, and they looked through me in that room. I felt invisible. I felt like what I was doing really didn't matter. And it didn't even feel personal to me. It felt like I'm not a name. And I remember that they asked me afterwards if I danced. And I felt like, what? Like, look at my resume. I just played Charity. Like, yeah, I can dance. It's, they just were so checked out. And I walked out that door, and I don't remember, it was a studio on like 41st and Dyer.
Okay.
Dry? I don't know what it was. But this goddamn studio had doors that weighed like 16 tons. And I had already felt like so defeated and invisible in that room. And then I made an complete and utter ass out of myself. I couldn't open the door. I couldn't get out of the room. It was too heavy. And I was in heels. And I closed that door and I was like, I think that's it. And I haven't auditioned.
Since then?
I haven't auditioned for a theater since then, no.
Now, was there anything else going on? Insofar as auditions are shitty and demeaning all of the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this sounds like one for the books, but in terms of this being the one that you go,
yeah.
I mean, because you just had this high, like you said, of doing Charity.
Yeah.
So your gas tank, your artistic tank is full at this moment.
Yeah.
So what if anything else was brewing that took you from like this incredible life high to I'm.
Well, you're very smart to ask because I mean, everything. It was everything. I was, I think I had just turned 30, 31 maybe. And I wanted a family, and I wanted to stop feeling like I was in my 20s and running around, and I was so tired. I was tired. My body was tired. I was tired of leaving all the time. I was really tired of, friends getting engaged and telling me the wedding date, and I would say, I would love to be there if nothing comes up. I was tired of not being able to commit to trips. I was just really starting to wear on me, and I thought, I've always wanted to have a family. And my cousin, Tanya, at one point, maybe a few years before I did Charity, just sort of called me out on the fact that if I really wanted what I said I wanted, which was a family, what steps was I taking to create a life that could welcome that in? And I wasn't taking any steps that would create the kind of life that I was dreaming of. And so that took a long time to really hit me. And I think doing Charity, it felt, well, gosh, her her journey in that show felt so vulnerable. And I just resonated with it so much. Do you know the show?
I don't, not at all.
She's just a girl who wants to be loved and keeps, literally and figuratively falling on her face. And I had felt at that moment that I was with somebody and I was like, I have found my love story. And I'm going to kiss all of this running around and all of this dreaming. I'm going to kiss that goodbye and start to be a real adult. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what else I was going to do. At that time, I was teaching, and I really loved it.
Teaching?
Yoga and dance. But I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that this didn't feel sustainable to me anymore. And so, yeah, I think it was a combination of all of that, really wanting to feel more grounded and know where the next paycheck was coming from, and I don't know, have health insurance or, these things that seemed so far away from where I was as a 30-year-old or 31-year-old woman. And I just, the dream started to change a little bit.
Do you think you could have done both? Or do you think it's possible to do both? These are things, and I don't know the answer. This really isn't a loaded question in any way. I just feel like that's not a conversation that we talk about. Like, if you're going to be a working actor, the goal is to be working, and yet it does cost a foundation where you live, the friends, the presence in your apartment. And if you have a family, like, that's sort of not, that you can't do that in the same way. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm curious, what's the answer? Is it this, just you live in a region? I know that in San Francisco there are a stable of actors. It's certainly not the whole community, but there are a few who are working like in the major equity houses and moving around. And I guess if you can put your foot down in a regional market, it's possible. Mm. But did you meet anybody in your shows or along the way who seemed to have a full life in the way you were looking for and was doing the thing you were doing?
If I did, they were few and far between. But I hold out. I really do have faith that I'm going to be able to find a nice balance of all of these things that I want. I think for me, it was that I was coming up pretty hard against a wall, and I pushed against it for a long time, and I was tired of, hitting my head against this wall. And
what was the wall?
That I had always said, I just want to work. I just, I don't care about fame or money or anything like that. I want to work for the love of it. And I was starting to not love it because of the cost, because of what it was, taking away from me on the other side of things, or that's how I was viewing it at the time. And so I started to follow what felt more aligned, and to just trust that taking a break or walking into a new avenue of my life was not shutting that 16-ton door forever. That my childhood dreams of it just going along this one path up until I died was not necessarily the way that it was going to play out for me, that I had to sort of allow myself to meander a little bit and to follow what felt right in those moments. And so I think that was kind of the biggest act of faith and trust that I've ever taken in myself, was that I can hit pause on this, or I can stop doing what I've been doing because it is what I'm feel I'm supposed to do or feel, it's what everybody else is doing. It's the only way. All of that just felt like it wasn't ringing true to me anymore. And to follow something else that I loved, which teaching yoga came as such a surprise to me that I would love it. I did it too deep in my own practice, and I did it as a way to take care of my body, but it quickly became the way that I took care of myself spiritually. And that I had to trust that had come into my life for a reason. And I'm never going to give up on performing. I'm never, I'm always creating in some aspect. It still is my first love. I also think that for a lot of my career, was in the non-ec world, playing roles, that were not necessarily appropriate for my age, but that was my vibe. I was the Velma in Hairspray at 25 in the non-ec world. Whereas, in equity, they would just get a 55-year-old or 60-year-old woman to do that. But that was sort of where I was living. Like I always read a little bit older, and my sense of humor and my presence was a little bit older. And I felt like this isn't going to happen for me right now. This isn't, once I joined equity, I felt like I needed to grow into my persona a little bit. But I fully intend on having it all.
Great.
Yeah.
So you're in a moment where you're coming up against your dreams as a performer, but then with the dreams of sort of your whole life.
Yeah.
And so you said that you then start following the things that feel right at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's yoga. What else does that mean at that?
That's yoga. That's saying no to things that take me away from my home, which is New York. Saying no to uprooting all of the time. Saying yes to stability and routine, which always scared me in the past. Routine equaled boring to me. And, once I got into my late 20s and early 30s, oh God, I just craved routine. I found freedom in routine because it gave me I could schedule in what I wanted without just crossing my fingers that it would work out, and that I would get the time that day to meditate, or that I would get the time, if it was afforded to me. And with the schedule that I could count on, I was able to really schedule in the things that mattered to me. I started writing. I had always been really afraid of writing. My dad was the writer, right? Like I was the actor. I wasn't supposed to be creating like that. And I did that by collaborating with my dad. We wrote a musical together that really stretched me in ways I had not been stretched before.
So that happened after Sweet Charity is when you started writing that musical with your dad?
We started writing that musical before Sweet Charity.
Oh, so let's just give a name to that musical.
It's called My Post-Traumatic Cruise Ship Cabaret, based on my time on the cruise ships.
Got it.
Yeah. No, we had started that a couple years before. My dad wrote a show called Swing State, and it was in, I believe it was 2011's New York Musical Theater Festival. And I was in between jobs at the time, in between theater gigs, when my father's musical got accepted into that festival. And I remember thinking that I wasn't going to work again for whatever reason. I called my dad crying on a rainy Monday, and I was walking in Central Park. It was in January, and I sat down on a bench that I later found out to be covered in fresh bird shit. I mean, it was just of course, then I'm crying on the phone to my dad that I'm never going to work again. And like a truck drives by and gets me all wet. It was like the most
Wow.
cliche, just girl falls apart moment. And my dad called me back that night and he said, I want you to be Bonnie in this show. I will move, heaven and earth to cast you in this production of New York Musical Theater Festival's Swing State. And we were so naive to think that, his non-equity daughter, that the festival would want anything to do with that. And I had originated the role.
So it had been done before?
It had been done. Yeah, we had done readings of it before. It had been done at Vermont Stage. I was not in that production, but this felt like my baby. And the festival was like, that's cute. We need a name. And that was really, really tough, both for me and for my father, because we thought, we've done this before. Dad writes it. I act in it. Easy peasy, beep bop boop. You're welcome, world. And that was just not how it was going to go this time. And I think our musical was sort of born out of that big, what felt like a defeat, but felt like a really, really big wound for the two of us. And so we thought, well, we're going to create something that no one can take away from us. And that's how we started writing together. And that's how I sort of got my feet wet in, no, I have something to say. And I know how to express and write and create what I want to see out there.
I feel like that's such a big part of believing that you are enough. I don't know if writing is a way to get there, or if you've already gotten there by the time you start writing. But that's something that I've struggled with, particularly with the idea of like writing scene work and dialogue, just the sort of the belief of, what do I have to say? Mm-hmm. What right do I have to put words in these characters' mouths? Right. And so to own that as something that you can do, that you're entitled to do, that you have enough perspective and humor and wisdom to share to produce something like that. Yeah. The fact that my one-man show has no words in it is very intentional. Yeah. Because I was too intimidated. I couldn't imagine writing a monologue that would hold people's attention for 45 minutes. Sure. But with no words, which I understand that there's still some kind of writing in there, but it doesn't feel like writing. Right. That was my way of skirting around that. Mm-hmm. But you
do it very well.
Thank you. But to come to speak to your point about believing that you are enough, I imagine that would have been a really big experience, because you're writing it, you're performing in it, you're turning your cruise ship experience, which was in many ways difficult and traumatic, into something that ultimately, is it broadly, because I haven't seen it, I know that there are funny parts in it, is it broadly a comedy, like at the end of the day, or does it turn?
It is, it's very funny, but I would say it's sort of a dark comedy.
Right. So you're turning something that was really dark for you into something that's a little dark, but mostly funny for other people. Yeah.
It felt like I was taking the power back, and we're referring to something that happened to me on the cruise ship where I was attacked. And so feeling for so many years that felt like I was a victim. And for me to put my own perspective on it and to make art out of something that deeply wounded me, that felt like how I was going to take the power back, and put my stamp on that story.
And that is such a part of believing that you are enough to say that my experience, almost as it happened, is worth representing on stage, and it's worth you paying to see. It's worth, hundreds of strangers spending a couple hours of their time to, bear witness to my experience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful place to stand.
Yeah.
So you had already been working on the musical with your dad before the Sweet Charity experience.
Yeah.
But had it been produced by that point?
We had done a production in January of 2016. We did our first production of it, which was in our hometown, in the little theater that I had grown up performing in. And then Sweet Charity was maybe 4 or 5 months after that. So it was all in that year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then has that happened again since? Or was that the...
You know what? I'm lying. We had done 2 productions of it. The first one was in my hometown, and the second one was in a little mountain town, like 45 minutes away from home. No, we have not done another production of it since. We did record the album of all the music. But no, we haven't really revisited that since 2016.
Okay, so then that project was more of a springboard than it was a safety net, because it was something that you had done that sort of proved that you can write.
Yeah. You
can make your own work that doesn't take you out of town.
Yes.
So by closing this 16-ton door for now, it wasn't... You knew that that didn't necessarily mean closing the door on your entire creative life.
Absolutely. That I could have... There were other ways for me to be artistic rather than just hoping someone would hire me to speak someone else's words. That I could actually have some agency in my career and not, it wasn't just a cross your fingers and hope you get the opportunity to do it.
Right.
It was, I'll make it myself.
Yeah, you can take the wheel. Which is such a powerful position to put yourself in.
Yeah.
And lets you have the agency to make the full life that you want. So I know that you're working on another musical now. Is that the very next thing is that the next writing project that happened after post-traumatic?
Yep. Yeah. So there were a few years there of just teaching yoga and
you audition for commercials. Yeah. When did that come in? Did that take additional training for you? Or is that something you're able to step into? Just how did that happen? I
took a class of a very dear friend, Mitchell, who I actually met on that first cruise ship. And he turned me on to this class called Brooke and Mary. And I took one of their courses there, and it was an on-camera course. I had never done really any on-camera work before. And my agent found me through that showcase. And I started, and she is primarily a commercial agent. So I just started going on auditions through her and started booking things. And it felt like the way that I could continue to call myself an actor. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. A lot of the commercials that I do are based in improv and comedy. And that has always felt really comfortable to me.
Do you have improv and comedy experience?
I do. Well, comedy for sure. Improv still scares the daylights out of me, but I have studied at UCB.
Okay.
And it's, to get me up on stage as an improviser makes me want to crawl into a hole and die. But to just, in front of a camera with a little bit of dialogue and they say ad-lib, go for it, do whatever you want, I'm quite happy to do that. But yeah, to long form sketch, oh my god,
I'm so the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, because if I am just improvising, then I have total ownership from beginning to end. So I know I'm going to fit into whatever the role is because I'm inventing the role right now.
Right.
As opposed to being in a position where you've written something, and particularly if it's an audition context, I have some insecurity that I'm not right for it anyway.
Sure.
So then by the time it gets to the ad-libbing, I feel like, again, who am I to put words into this character that, I didn't create.
Yeah.
I haven't done any, I haven't done weeks of rehearsal to
Right.
embody. That can feel like more of a hurdle to being inventive.
Yeah.
So if it's totally prepared, I can step in and then, work through the process to own someone else's words as written. If it's mine to make up, I will do that and know that, well, that's my job to make it up. That ad-libbing part is just where I go,
Yeah. That's funny because if I have the time to write something, then I feel safe. I feel safe performing that. If something is given to me, then if it's stupid, that's your fault, not mine. But dear Lord, if I'm asked to improvise, I have this feeling that I'm going to be caught. That people will find out that I'm not that smart, or that I'm, I dropped out of Occidental College. Have this, and I think it's so common that people feel like a fraud or feel.
It's the same. That's the same feeling that I'm describing.
Yeah.
It's just I'm afraid of being caught when it's like the character wouldn't say that. What a stupid ad lib that was. You clearly haven't paid attention to the script at all. Your years of your graduate degree's worth nothing. Good day, sir.
Good day. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, yeah, we are. I think we're talking about the same thing. It's just in
different
what
triggers.
Circumstances. Yeah. Gosh. Oh, to think of being on an improv stage and someone, brings up a reference that I don't get, or that that the audience would know something that I wouldn't.
Oh.
No, thank you. No.
So you were already at Sweet Charity Time, had done this class, and were doing commercials. So at the time that you decide to take your regional theater auditioning break, you have writing has now been established as a thing that you can do. So you have that creative outlet in your pocket.
Yeah.
You have commercials, which you can do.
I don't know that I had done commercials yet. Now I'm getting my
your timeline
mixed up. I'm not sure that I was doing commercials at the time that I had done Sweet Charity.
Have you gotten any major windfalls from commercials? I know that commercials can be like a couple $100 for a buyout, or they can be like a national run where you make, like, you live on that for years.
Yeah.
Where in that have you fallen so far?
Yeah, I haven't bought my House in the Catskills yet.
I guess.
For my Pizza Hut commercial. But I've had some pretty... Gosh, it is so nice. Like, there was one thing that I filmed years ago that just keeps... It's like the gift that keeps on giving. And again, like, I'm not bawling because of it. But it's so nice to get that call every year that they want to renew it and that I haven't done shit and I'm just getting a check.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, everything is going non-equity and...
Or non-SAG.
Non-SAG. Yeah. Non-union. And so there aren't... I mean, yes, people can still make a fortune on commercials, but it's rare that I'm up for those banging nationals,
Yeah. So when you do get that call and they are renewing, what are you able to do with that? Is that 1 month's rent? Is that one nice dinner? Is that...
This year, for that one commercial, it was like 5 months rent.
Nice.
Yeah. No. I don't pay very much in rent.
Well, that's true.
Because I did something
also
good in a past life, and my rent is very low. But yeah, it's just an unexpected little bump, and damn, does that feel good?
Yeah. I am very interested in breaking into. I mean, if the commercial scene happens, it'd be great. But having that same sort of setup with television residuals, which gives you the economic permission to do the off-Broadway show that, is a really cool artistic experience, but no money.
Yeah.
Or just to develop your own work and to spend the, 2 months writing
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only thing you have to do.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to some degree, I mean, I don't know if that's the way you've used that money, but that's...
Yeah, I feel like it's permission money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sweet Charity, couple years, you'd already written the post-traumatic, couple years, and now you're on the Best Friends musical.
Yes.
Awesome. Which is so good.
Thank you.
What's the inception of that, the dreams of that?
Well, this is a musical that I've written with my childhood best friend, Miranda Jones. And we've done a couple readings of it. And we seem to work well, the two of us, when we have a deadline. And when we know people are going to be watching us in a couple months, we better get our shit together. So that's what we keep doing. And it keeps getting... we're making edits and rewrites in between each of these readings. The next one is in Vermont in December, end of December. So we haven't hit our home state yet. We've done them in New York and in New Jersey, and so this will be our first time coming back home. And I think that's where we are right now. It doesn't feel like we have our final draft. It doesn't. We don't have our opening yet. We right now it's untitled, but we're playing around with some ideas that we really, really like, and we feel like there should probably be a song to go along with that title.
Right.
And so we're just sort of hacking away at it and having a fucking ball doing it. It is a musical about our friendship, and it is very honest, which is, I think...
Oh yeah, it's another musical for you that it's owning your life, right?
Yeah.
And it's believing that all of that's worth putting out there. Again, just owning your experience and
my story.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't yet delved into creating a character that's not me. So far it's been like deciding that my experience is that there's something universal about it, even in its specificity, that there's something that people will resonate with, and trusting that if I tell the truth, that's interesting. But I haven't yet thought of, what about a character named Kathy who lives in Zimbabwe?
Right.
There's nothing like that in my repertoire yet.
I don't know how many Kathys are in Zimbabwe anyway.
Well, she moved there. Obviously, she wasn't born there.
I mean, it'd be okay if she was. Just saying.
I wrote it. I get to decide.
That's true. If I was improvising it, that's the offer I made,
there
and
you
now
go.
I get to play that out. No one gets to say I'm wrong.
And
I'm making it up.
Exactly. So this process of writing with her has been so interesting because we've known each other half of our lives, more than half of our lives, and like I said, it's raw and it is vulnerable, and I think that's what gives it a lot of its grit, and it's also wildly vulnerable to put on stage, and to continue the process of, it's kind of meta in a way, like life is mirroring art, and art is mirroring life, and are we having this fight for real right now, Miranda, or are we quoting the script, or are just sort of parsing through the pieces of our relationship and how we can turn that into something, and what we need to scrap, and just sort of working through a process together with all of our flaws and all of the ways that we butt heads and all of the ways that we lift each other up as well.
Yeah. So at this point in your life, you're working on this musical, which is so good, and you have a creative partner and you're setting deadlines. So that's happening.
Yeah.
We haven't really gone into it, which is fine, but you work for this great company and you have a full-time yoga teaching position. So you're doing something that you care about and have the stability that you were looking for.
Yeah.
What's the big dream? In terms of when you think about the picture that you're steering for, or like, your guiding star.
Yeah.
You don't wait tables anymore. I mean, now you're doing only things that fill you.
Yes. I think my guiding star would be relationship with people, whether that's students or people watching my work, or family or friends. I think continue, and also relationship with myself. I find that I'm drawn to helping and sharing my experiences as a way to help others, and whether that's through adjusting someone's warrior 2, or whether that's through being brave in my story that I share through singing or through dance or through acting or through whatever that may be. It's about like making a connection with people and finding those things that light me up. And those things tend to be geared around other people and geared around finding humor and finding depth and finding people who are unafraid to talk about hard things, to talk about what really matters to them, to talk about how their experiences have led them to walk around the world differently. So I'm not sure exactly what it looks like. I know it has kids in it for me. I know that I want to share with my children art and movement and beauty and connection and creation. I want to keep creating.
Yeah.
How's that for vague?
But what's wonderful about that is that it's specific enough that you have a direction, but open enough that there's a lot of different ways to make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's something we've talked about this, but I have an accountability partner, and we check in every Monday and set goals and keep each other on track. And that's something that we're really clear about is first, the goal is only to get you going. It's not actually about that one specific thing.
Right.
And that you want to find a goal that's inspiring but open enough so that there are ways to achieve it, and at the end you can recognize the growth and all of the good things that have happened. If there's only one way to achieve the goal or one way to win, then there's one way to win in a million billion ways to fail.
Right.
Even if those failures involve like incredible growth, and even if those failures are beautiful lives you are leading, if they're not the one thing you defined, then technically you failed.
Right.
And who wants to set themselves up? No one should set themselves up to carry that around.
Right.
And so to have a criteria that paints a broad picture of happiness, but that you can see enough that keeps you growing, that keeps you moving, that keeps you working. I think that's the healthiest way to do that. So I like it.
Well, and that's what matters.
Yeah, this is all about my approval. And
Curtis likes it. Yeah, it does feel rather vague, but it has those touch points of the things that really matter. And I think I learned the hard way that exactly what you're saying, that if there's only one way to succeed, and that was, I just saw myself under bright lights and my name, up in the lights, and I didn't take into account, well, how could I? Because I was, 7, but I didn't take into account the ways that dreams change and the ways that, growing up and realizing what the concessions are that you have to make, like how that affects everything.
This is something else we talk about in our calls, is the way that X only solves your X problem. Mm-hmm. So, having more money only solves your money problem.
Right.
It actually doesn't give you total fulfillment.
Right.
It doesn't make everything in your life easier. It just means that you don't have to worry about money anymore. Mm-hmm. Fame, only solves the problem of like no one knowing who the hell you are.
Right.
But again, it doesn't make you a happy person.
Right.
That doesn't, necessarily mean that like your life is better than it would have been otherwise.
Right.
And so not to say that there aren't ways of living full happy lives if you have more money or if you're famous, but just to only shoot for that one thing.
Right.
That I'm only going to work towards being famous. At some point, there's, even if you achieve it, then you look around and go like, but what else?
Yeah. Yeah. What next?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm famous. That's supposed to be, now I have everything, but actually all I have is fame, and I don't have a foundation because I've been traveling so much. I don't have meaningful relationships. Mm-hmm. I don't have a community that I feel like I'm contributing to in a way that gives me purpose.
Right.
But I can walk down the street and people will know who I am.
Right. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
So that realization feels like the click of, when you're 7, all you see is like, well, those people on TV look very glamorous. Mm-hmm. And I can assume, I'm going to guess that if they look that good, that everything must be working for them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I bought into that so hard. I remember crying one day after school at Tanya McDonough's house. Shout out. Hey, Tanya. Because my parents we had like an hour of screen time per day. And so I would never dream of going home after school and doing my homework while watching TV, because what a waste of my screen time. I wanted to save it for The Simpsons or whatever. But at Tanya's house, we could watch MTV and do our homework. And I just remember bawling one day because Mariah Carey was on TV on TRL or whatever it was, and I had to do my math homework. And I just thought, Mariah does not have to fuck with math, and how desperately unfair this was. And I had to do this math homework, and she got to wear those heels and have that weave on and look the way she looked, and just, what's the point of anything?
I had that I was actually in college at the time, and it didn't shake me to the bones, but it was more like a little resentment that I carried around, because Indiana Jones 4 was going to come out.
Sure.
And I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan.
Right.
We did not know at that time it was going to be the disaster that it was. But I knew that there was a part that Shia LaBeouf was in it, and he's about my age.
Oh.
And so he has a major part in an Indiana Jones movie. And he's shooting that in the jungles with Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. And I'm studying microeconomics to get the business degree that I had to, because it was like the deal with my parents.
Awful.
And why am I doing, microeconomics, which I could give two shits about, when someone else gets to be in an Indiana Jones movie?
It's so unfair.
So unfair. I did take solace, when the movie was was so terrible. I mean, I went to the midnight screening in full screen accurate Indiana Jones costume.
Oh my.
So when it was so terrible, there was no way to hide or pretend like I wasn't just at that movie.
Right.
I wish I could like go back in time and like drop myself a change of clothes.
Right, tone it down.
Yeah. Just like, you're going to want this afterwards.
I knew that you were an Indiana Jones fan, but I didn't know it was like this.
No, yeah, my parents were really upset. My mom was really upset when I was supposed to be like researching colleges and spent infinitely more time doing research on the Indiana Jones costume and like where you can get like affordable, mostly screen accurate stand-ins, because my dream, like some people want to know about the making of a movie, and I could kind of care less about that with Indiana Jones, like because I sort of don't want to be in Indiana Jones. I just want to be Indiana Jones.
Right. But it's different. You don't want to know how the sausage gets made either.
Right.
Yeah.
But, for the record, if they reboot Indiana Jones, which would be a terrible idea, I still want to play the part. Yeah. Because being in an Indiana Jones movie is as close as I'm ever going to get to being Indiana Jones. Right. So I think they're making a fifth one. And it's not in production yet. But like, again, he's so old. I don't necessarily think this is a great idea, but I love it. Yeah. Like I will have to figure out who the casting director is and submit and like try to weasel my way in.
I'll support you in this wholeheartedly.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. So that's as close I'm going to get to that dream. Yeah. But this was all to say that yes, I've had that same experience of, why does this person get to seemingly have it all? Mm-hmm. And yet, Shia LaBeouf, who was in Indiana Jones 4, has not had the easiest or like happiest ride ever since. So, and he also had the Transformers franchise. I mean, the man has made a lot of money and done a lot of things. Yeah. Not the happiest person. Yeah. And I think that's a story. I'm not picking on Shia. There's that's a common story. Famous unhappy people. Famous, successful, talented, unhappy people. And so trying to check for myself, I want to keep training so that I can be, a talented, good, skilled actor. And I keep, hustling because I want to be a working actor. Mm-hmm. But I also want to be a happy actor. And there's a lot of people who, I have those first three things, but not the last one.
Yeah. And I think that's where, in my life at least, where yoga has really sort of rounded me out in a way that having a practice like yoga where I need to self-reflect and I need to go inside and really peek at what's happening and where are the places where I feel deflated or like I'm playing small for whatever reason. I can't I can't ignore those will not go away until I address them. And as an actor, just bopping from regional gig to regional gig and meeting new people and putting on,
it's a fresh start every time.
Sure. It's quite easy to keep running from those things. And I'm so grateful for yoga and for my spiritual practice now that doesn't allow me to keep turning a blind eye to those things, because I think I am much happier now. And it has nothing to do with money or, because Lord knows we don't have any, or, or fame, right, or any of those things that I thought equaled happiness. Like, Lord.
You are one of the people who I think of as being best at self-care. I feel like you do that for yourself in a lot of different ways. You'll, go on short meditation jaunts at Kripalu. You go to the spa, and you have your massage dates. Like it doesn't seem like a treat. It feels like something that you're very dedicated to, and that is an active and intentional part of the way that you live your life, that even get through a day. Would that be fair to say?
I think so. Yes. And it's new for me. I also think it's something that I have to do. I think everyone, benefits from it, but I also think that there's some, certainly some depression that I am sort of battling against. And so everything that I can do to help myself to keep my head above water with that, I'm going to do. And I certainly didn't grow up in a house where that was, I never saw my mother do those things for herself. She didn't have time, or that would be selfish. And it's really only in recent years that I've taken, that I've let go of that idea that this is a choice, because it feels like something I have to do. If I want to continue to do work in the world and to show up for my students and to be strong enough to create and tell my story, then I fucking better walk the walk and talk the talk, because I can't show up half full. Mm-hmm. Because my half full is more like empty, I think. Yeah, and it's filling the well, because the things that I'm interested in and the things that I contribute to my community take a lot out of me.
Right. And so what was the point when that became, when you decided that it was necessary? Or is there a phrase that you use in your head when you tell yourself, that this is, or remind yourself that this is necessary rather than a luxury, or a choice, or indulgent? Mm-hmm. Like what is the conversation with yourself that either sort of brought you to terms with this, like the decision to take care of yourself, or how do you decide to do that on even now that you've even started just on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Because it's never, unless you have all of these things booked months in advance, it's never automatic. I mean, it's always a choice.
Yeah.
Sitting to meditate
is
an
right.
absolute choice. And
it
takes willpower and intention.
Yeah.
So what's the way that you sort of work your head around that?
I mean, it's a little cliche, but I do think about, the air mask on the airplane. No?
I don't know what you're talking about.
When a plane is going down, they always say put on
the yellow thing that drops from the ceiling.
You got to do that before you can even do your child's. Because if if you're not showing up, being able to breathe oxygen, then you can't really help anybody else. So that would be the cliche, but I really do think about that.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And what that also does, that I think is a nice workaround for a lot of the self-talk that can stop people from taking care of themselves, is that it keeps it all framed through the lens of service.
Sure.
That I can't do good for other people if I'm, on empty. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even, I'm not even doing this for me, I'm doing this for them.
Yeah. I also think that, I don't know, the way that I'm made up, these feel like things that, if I notice that I'm feeling off, or I'm feeling low or irritable or any of those things, it's like I go through that checklist. It's like, did I meditate today? Did I read anything that felt uplifting? Have I taken care of myself in the ways that I know I have to, in order to just have like a baseline? And usually if I'm feeling one of those ways, the answer is no, I didn't. I skipped it this morning. The other day I woke up in time to do my meditation and to have time to drink my coffee. And instead, I chose to look through Facebook. And gosh, did I suffer for it the rest of the day. It was actually kind of comical to me. It was just like, well, I could do this thing, or I could go down this rabbit hole.
I can do the things that I know will make me feel better, or I could do the thing that's right in front of me.
Right.
That will likely make me feel bad.
And it did.
Yeah.
But that's why I say it doesn't feel like a choice, because it's like, well, if I want to function today, I better do this.
Right.
But you're right. It is a choice. I do think that I can get really bogged down by the idea of discipline, because discipline is what made me student so hard in high school, and that wasn't necessarily helpful for me. And discipline, I think, especially for women, it's just one more of those fucking things that we, if I were better, if I were enough, if I were like that person, then I would be able to have, that workout regime or that diet or that whatever. Like, discipline gets so, it's kind of a nasty word to me.
I mean, I'm sure that does have special impact on women, but the broad phenomena you're describing, I can relate to just as much of the, I'm not good enough, but if I had more discipline, then I would be.
Yeah, if I tried a little bit harder. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I get a little tripped up in my meditation is a discipline. It's something that I choose to do every day because I have willpower or something like that. Because it feels different. It feels, I don't know. But yeah, I get, I definitely rail against what I should do. So if I deem something necessary and if I put it on my to-do list, I'm probably less likely to do it.
Also, the other thing about the should is you can phone those things in. Like, if, like at Circle in the Square, you're saying that there were people who were going through it and, sort of coasting, because if you think of it all as just like, I should do this and I can do it with, only half my brain actually engaged, then you will. But when it's something that you want to do and you are choosing to do, that's when you double down and fully participate and really get the most out of it.
Right.
I think about that, particularly around meditation, because, I do those 10-day silent retreats, and at the end of them, they encourage you to meditate 2 hours every day, an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And they really encourage you to like make that a strong determination. And I was doing that for a while, not the 2 hours, but I sort of settled with myself where I said, like, every day for an hour, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But then I found that when I was doing it, it was because I told myself to do it for an hour. Like, it was something I'm just checking off the list. Yeah. And I wasn't sort of surrendering to it or fully participating in it. That I wasn't fully committed as like, this is something I want to be doing and I'm going to give it the attention that it deserves. And I'm going to open myself to this in the way that I have to create lasting, meaningful change. Again, very similar to Circle in the Square. And so I absolutely believe, I've done this practice enough to really believe that were I someone who wanted to do it in the morning and at night for an hour, I would see like profound change, and that it would be something that would, that I could become an enlightened person or something close to that. But until it's something that I feel like compelled in my bones to do at that amount of time every day, it feels like as a discipline, it's not going to work until I want it.
Yeah.
And so there's no point in making it a discipline.
I feel that, yeah, that resonates with me a lot. And I think, I recently stopped drinking, and for so long it was, I had those sort of, I would say to myself, this is something that I should want to stop, but I really didn't. For whatever reason, it was serving me at the time. And I think asking for the willingness is like where to start, because as long as I was saying this is bad and I should stop, it wasn't helpful. I could stop for a couple weeks or a couple months even, but it was, I think the term is white knuckling it. It was just like out of my own, I don't know, stubbornness, really. And because it wasn't actually coming from a place where, like you said, in my bones I wanted to stop, it wasn't gonna last. I could be as fucking disciplined as I wanted, but at the in a weak moment, there goes that. And I don't think you can just like clench your butt cheeks and go through it for months and months. Like those weak moments are going to come, and they still come. And do I meditate every single day of my life? Absolutely not. But just like I prayed for the willingness to see my relationship with alcohol differently, I think I've really prayed for the willingness to like fully understand what the practice of meditation adds to my life. And you're right, it does. It doesn't, it's not necessarily easy every day to sit and be silent, but it's something that I like fully in my body understand the benefits of. And so I'm much more likely to do it now.
Yeah.
But God, 3 years ago, if you had told me that, fuck you. It wasn't where I was. And that's fine. I had to get here.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of the self-care things that you do. Mm-hmm. Reading something that's uplifting.
Yeah.
Meditating.
Yeah.
I mentioned the massage and going to a spa.
Yeah.
You have your yoga practice.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the big things? Is there anything else that you do?
I talk to my family.
Mm-hmm.
My journal. I like to give myself permission to be on the couch. That used to be really hard for me. I felt like I think for a long time, because we didn't clock out as actors, there was no punch card that said I'm done for the day. I had a really hard time letting myself relax. And even if I was on the couch and watching something and trying to relax, I was also on my computer submitting for auditions. It felt like I didn't have an off switch.
Yeah, that's hard. One of the things as actors is there's an infinite number of things you could be doing. Yeah. And you don't know what, in any of those things could be
the thing.
Yeah.
Totally. So it was really hard for me to take that time. And now I see that that I get joy out of it, and that it helps me. It's a way for me to restore a little bit. I try to get out of the city and into nature as much as I can. I listen to a lot of podcasts. That's sort of that's recently been taking over a little bit more of my reading is now coming through my ears. Mm-hmm. But I really like that because I can still be moving through the city and doing my day and taking in information. Mm-hmm. I love my essential oils. I love cuddling with my ferocious kitten, Rue. Yeah, those are the things I think. Oh, riding my bike. Mm-hmm. And when I say mine, I mean city bikes.
Right.
Traveling. Going home.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any places or resources that you recommend for people in terms of particularly uplifting things that you've read or podcasts that fill you, even anything that you've used. I don't know exactly what your path was into meditation, or if you use apps or anything like that, but anything that you'd like to recommend for other people to fill their well and to do self-care?
Yeah. Pema Chodron.
Lovely.
She's a big one for me. Tara Brach. She has a free podcast that sometimes it's talks of hers and sometimes it's guided meditations. Marianne Williamson. Gabby Bernstein. Anything Cheryl Strayed. Anything Brene Brown. There are people like that remind me that where I am is just where I'm supposed to be. That's huge for me, because I think in the industry of theater, there's that sense of hustle and that sense of just a few more steps, just a few, just there's never, or at least for me, I never felt like I was doing enough or that I was enough. I shouldn't say never. There was always that next audition, and there was that next role, and there was that, the next thing and the next thing, and that's living in the future, and the future hasn't happened yet, and that feels very exhausting. So for me, that reminder of I am right where I'm supposed to be, that's really helpful. And those are some of the people that even just the tone of their voice brings me such comfort and lets me know that, yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing my work. I'm good. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, even if it feels like hell where I am that day.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I know Pema Chodron talks about, as that about making a home in the mess.
Yeah.
And that change is the fundamental state of being always. So when the ground, feels like it's falling out from under you, that's the place.
Yeah.
To make a home.
Yeah. That fundamental groundlessness
that's her phrase.
Yeah. That's really hard. It's really hard to feel like you can stay there for any amount of time. But that's the work. This
quote I got from my girlfriend, and I forget who she got it from, but it was about someone was describing, I think, their journey with anxiety, mm-hmm. and how they kept trying to get out of it, to overcome their anxiety, and because they felt like they were just in a rut, and that the sort of life-changing advice that someone gave them was, well, what if you just made a home in the rut? Mm-hmm. What if you didn't have to be anywhere else or anything else but what you are? And what if you practiced, living from you right now?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, like really, really powerful. And I do think that like that rut or that nagging feeling or whatever, wherever it is and whatever is coming up for you, it's sort of like the kid in the back of the car who's asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like the more you ignore them, the louder it's going to get. It's not going to go away. Like it just wants to be those feelings and those nagging emotions and like living in the rut. It just wants to be like fully embraced and felt, and then it'll lessen like its grip on you. It doesn't have that power anymore when you just look it in the eye. You turn around to the kid and you say, 45 fucking minutes, Paul, shut up. Mm-hmm. In the most loving way. Sure.
Yeah, I think there's a Joseph Campbell quote about something like that. Basically about like the things that like our monsters are really just parts of us waiting to be loved.
Yes, I love that.
So that the things that run you ragged are the things that just need, that actually need attention more than you trying to escape them.
Yeah, and there are those parts of you that are, just misguided ways of trying to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, you think that's so sweet. You think that I have to do this in order to be whole. Like, thank you for trying to help.
Right.
Let me give you a hug and move you over into this direction. And,
right. Yeah. So those are people you read that lift you up?
Yeah, those are people
podcasts,
I read.
Anything just to offer, people a starting place in their own self-care or more things they can add to their well.
I think it's really about giving yourself permission to trust yourself in just that simple action of noting when something is filling you up. It's so easy to blow right on past the things that make you feel that give you a spark.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to one of my aunts the other day, and she's one of my favorite people, and she was like, she's 60 something years old. I never realized that I like to put things together. I have an eye for interior decorating and for putting things in nice places and making them look pretty. She's like, I'm 60 whatever. I never even realized that about myself, because it always just felt like, oh, I'm just doing this because I live here now, and and so noticing first of all the things that give you any sense of joy, and then following in those directions, and when you're walking in those directions, you pick up people and things and words or songs or whatever. Like, those things start to come to you because the universe is attracted to people who are walking towards joy. And I don't know, for me, I found a lot of joy in those shelf help books, that's and in comedy and in humor and in people being brave and so I don't know. I mean, I think for me it started with that little Cheryl Strayed Tiny Beautiful Things book, and it was like, wow, this made me feel things. This made me feel connected. It made me feel not alone. It made me feel like there were parts of every one of those little stories that she addressed that I could relate to, even someone that had a very different life experience than me. And then it was like, what other? There's a Carrie Tennis book called Since You Asked that's sort of along those lines, and then that opened up into this path, and then that opened up to, oh, well, you should read so and so. So yeah, I mean, it's trying on a lot of different hats and trying on a lot of different things and noticing what speaks to you and giving yourself permission to get curious about, even if it's a really bad Indiana Jones movie, like whatever. I liked number 3, so I'm going to go to number 4, and maybe that's going to, turn me into Game of Thrones. I don't know. But knowing that it's it's your own path.
Right. Well, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much.
So much fun.
Is there a place that people can go to find out more about you and your work and what you're up to, be it yoga or the plays you're writing or otherwise?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at @VDunleavy. That's VDUNLEAVY at @VDunleavy. Or you can go to yogawithvanessa.co.
That's the website.
Yeah, that's my website, and it's mostly about yoga. But I'm hoping to. Well, there's also VanessaDunleavy.com, but that is like a scary rabbit hole of performances past. So if you don't like me very much and you want to go and watch me do shit that I should probably take off the internet, then go there. Check that out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we've got your Instagram, your yoga site, and your performer site, House of Horrors.
My House of Horrors. Yeah. VanessaDunleavy.co, not com. Oh, no. Just kidding. YogaWithVanessa.co.
Okay.
There's apparently another yoga teacher out there named Vanessa, and shestole.com.
There's another Alex Curtis who's also a yoga teacher.
Stop.
Yeah.
What?
So if you Google Alex Curtis yoga, I'm not I don't even think I show up, but there is somebody else named Alex Curtis who's like right there.
Does he live in New York?
It's a she.
Wah!
And I don't think she lives in New York. I think she's somewhere else. But
well, I think that actually helps your cause that she is a woman. Because no one's going to be like, oh yeah, this is him.
Right. We're not going to be confused.
No.
So, right, there's that. But, like, she's beat me to the URL. So,
right.
And she's beat me to the top of Google search results, which will be pretty hard for me to dethrone her, I think. But if I put enough grit into it, maybe that'll be possible.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily want to be known as Alex Curtis, the yoga teacher.
Fair.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, as of right now, we're chipping away at Alex Curtis, the podcast host.
Hell yeah, we are.
We've got that going for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're wonderful.
As are you.
And I so appreciate your time and for you, joining me on this little adventure.
I'm so honored. Truly. Proud of you.
Thanks.
Love you.
Love you.
Hey guys, just a couple quick things before you go. First off, thank you so much for listening. Stop Waiting Tables is a brand new show, so it means the world that you're here and that you've listened all the way to the end. So thank you. You can find out more about today's guest and check out a full list of all of the episodes that I've recorded on my website, www.alexmcurtis.com/podcast. Also, if you live in the New York area, feel free to pop by and say hello. I have a one-man show called Chalk, a silent comedy. That's chalk like you draw on a chalkboard, chalk. And that happens every month in the East Village at the Crane Theater. And if you're interested in coming to check that out, it's a really playful, imaginative show, and all the details about that are on my website as well. Again, I'm Alex Curtis, and this is Stop Waiting Tables. Happy listening, and until next time. Check, please.